And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Ann Tunaley, who has had both a near-death and a shared death experience, which we're going to talk about and more. Ann, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
And let's kind of start chronologically with your near-death experience when you were a child.
Yes, they say that you can't remember your infant stages. You only remember after, I think they say like 2 or 3. But I remember as an infant, I wasn't even able to roll over yet. So I was very, very young. And still to this day, it feels like it happened yesterday, that it's just as clear. I was an infant. I was lying in my crib. I was alone in the room. And way back in the early 60s, they would put like little tassels on the feet of your sleeper. They didn't have as many safety concerns back then as they do these days. And so I remember I had my foot up, to my mouth, chewing on it. And I chewed it off and it went down my throat. I remember this scary feeling, of choking, but I remember also, drooling, and I was trying so hard to get it out of my mouth. Yet my jaws or my throat wasn't strong enough. It just, barely a few months old. So I'd get it up just so far and it would slide back down my throat again. And I just remember being very scared. And then it did go down my throat. And all I remember was a feeling of floating toward the ceiling and then just bathed in this amazing warm light. It was so comfortable. It was perfect. And then all of a sudden, I felt pain and I came to, and my mother had me. She was screaming and hitting my back and shaking me. And then it came out of my mouth. It was a very, short experience, but it felt amazing.
Has that memory faded since?
Not at all.
It has not. Wow, that's amazing.
It's like it just happened. And I'm 61 years old. So we're talking, over 60 years ago.
Well,
it's like it happened yesterday.
That is your first time crossing over the veil. And I wonder if that set your life up for abilities that you didn't even realize.
I believe it did, Jeff. From a very young age, I was an empath. I remember as a child sitting in my room and a man, Native American man, long hair, very kind. He would sit in the room with me for hours and we would talk. And it never crossed my mind that a man shouldn't be in my bedroom with me, or, that someone coming through my room didn't see him and say, who is this? Who's this man in your room? It just never occurred to me because it was something that I seemed to have had experienced from such a young age. I didn't know any other way. I guess I assumed everybody, could see, these people that appeared in my room. It seemed normal to me.
How long did he visit you? I mean,
oh my gosh, several years.
Okay.
Several years. And then one day he said that I didn't need him anymore, but that he would always be around.
Do you think he was like a spirit guide or somebody you knew from a past life?
I have a feeling he was more like a spirit guide. He was there when I needed him the most. My grandmother basically raised me. My mother worked full time and was a single parent because my dad died 5 months before I was born. So my grandmother, who had polio, was home and she raised us while my mother worked. And so when she crossed over when I was 10 years old, I had a very hard time. I was very attached to her. And he seemed to be there almost daily at that point. And I would think until I was maybe 12 or 12 and a half, he was there almost daily. So it really got me through a real rough patch in my life.
All right, well, let's fast forward in time to your shared death experience.
Sure. Now, this was the morning of Sunday, October 6th of 2013. I woke up, I had a clock near my bed, and the clock said 7:26 a.m. I remember briefly just seeing it as my eyes opened, but I woke up screaming, terrified out of my mind. I don't normally wake up screaming from dreams, but I was convinced I was dead. I was convinced that I had died. but I couldn't understand. I kept touching my arms, my face, feeling around, and I couldn't understand how I still had a body if I were dead. Now I was young, I wasn't the age I am now, so I didn't really know that much about, crossing over and these type things. But uh, I just felt like if I were dead, I wouldn't have a body. My son came running out of his room. He was 18 years old at the time and asked if I was okay. And so it took him some convincing, but I believed that, okay, I was alive and it must have just been a terrible dream. So after I calmed down, I turned the TV on, and it usually came on channel 10, which was our local news channel. And every 10 minutes, they repeated the news and added new things if something else occurred. So in a short time, the newscaster came on and he said, breaking news, woman from my small town. I'd probably rather not say just in case her family sees it. Woman from my small town had just died in a terrible car accident in Phoenix, Arizona, and that she died at 4:26 a.m., the exact time I woke up. Now, my memory in this dream, and it's still as vivid as it was back then in 2013, um, my my memory from that is that I was sitting in a black SUV. We were going down the highway, and it was very dark. Now, I don't carry a purse, Jeff. It's just something that I've never done. And I've always been teased about it. Everybody says, grow up, be a woman, carry a purse, but I never have. Okay. But in the dream, I set my purse next to me on the, between the two back seats. I was on the right-hand side behind the front passenger seat, put my purse to the side, and I was holding my phone. I glanced up, and the man that was driving the SUV was a stranger to me. I didn't recognize him, but he's driving the car. I'm not afraid of him or anything. I was comfortable. We're going down the highway. And after a very short time, I hear him scream, just no words, just scream. I look up, and there are blinding lights in my eyes. I hear a big crash like metal, and I'm dead. I floated up. I saw my body down below. I didn't really understand that it was me. And boom, I'm waking up screaming in my bed, thinking I'm dead. So come to find out, this woman died at the exact same time I woke up. She was from my city. She had attended a conference in Phoenix, Arizona for work, and she was going to the airport. She had hired this black Cadillac SUV from a ride service, and he was driving her to the airport. They were about 10 minutes from the Phoenix airport, and a man who was driving drunk had made a U-turn on the highway and headed back into oncoming traffic, missing many cars and then hitting this car head on. The woman died at the scene. The man was trapped in the car and had some pretty serious injuries. And then the man who hit them had some injuries also, but he was arrested afterwards and got many years in jail. He had had previous DUIs, previous drug charges, and he actually had blown 4 of his fingers off his left hand, making a bomb in his family's licensed daycare center. So I guess the judge had told him he better clean up his act many times, and this was the final straw. So he was incarcerated for this. But what an experience! I really believed that was me going through that, and I didn't understand how I could have this happen to me, not even knowing this woman. She was a total stranger to me, even though I'm in a small town. Come to find out years later, now our city's set up in square blocks, no one-way streets or anything like that. So the house directly across from me, facing me, was one family, and directly behind them, back to back, was this woman's house. So she lived not even a block from me. I just crossed the street, go through that person's yard, and there was her house. Yet I never knew her. But it's like it happened yesterday, Jeff. The details, everything, the feeling.
Now that you've had time to process this whole thing, what kind of conclusions have you come to?
I'm as puzzled as I was when it happened, Jeff. I know there has to be a connection because she's from this town. She lives so close to me. But why I experienced it, not even knowing her, I'm just at a loss. I'd really like to find out if anybody else has some ideas as to why this may have happened. And I'm just very confused about it, even after all these years.
Did you ever speak to anyone in her family about it?
I didn't because they are very strict Roman Catholic, and if I had mentioned something like this, I think it would have really upset them. I've looked up her family on Facebook. I've seen a lot of their stuff. They're very religious, but they don't. To me, it doesn't seem like they would be open to hearing something like this, and I didn't want to upset anybody.
I totally get where you're coming from. I'm just guessing that perhaps she contacted you in some way because she wanted this story told to her family.
That was my first thought, Jeff. And then the more I, looked the family up and this and that, I just felt like maybe it would be more upsetting than comforting. I don't know. It was just my guess, but it just didn't feel right to me. Although I am a psychic medium, and I do have many people come to me and ask me to give their family messages, which I do. I look them up. I do anything to find them, and I give them the messages. I'd have to say about 75% of the time, people are pretty open to it, and it does help them. But then there's always those that, think I'm some kind of quack and I want money or something like that.
Right.
So I do try, if there's any way to comfort anybody from a situation like that, I'm all for it.
Well, at least you may be able, and I'm not telling you what to do, obviously, but I was thinking that at least you may be able to relay that she wasn't in any pain.
Mhm.
And if you saw her floating up to the light, that, maybe
Mhm.
she's going somewhere peaceful, she was peaceful, and that she's still around.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Now that the times, more time has gone by, I think it's probably something to think about, and maybe consider that, maybe I wasn't correct in my assumptions.
But you could be, I don't know, I don't want, I may
You
be,
know,
you may tell them they get angry at you and come back and get angry at me. So I don't know.
no, I would never tell them that you told me to do that. I'm just saying that, maybe I wasn't correct. And if I did it, and they weren't open to it, I could always ask them in advance, are you open to hearing something,
Mhm.
that I would like to tell you about, your mom's or sister's or whatever's, death experience. And if they say
Mhm.
no, then I don't mention anything. But I think
Right.
it's a good idea, after all these years, now that I have more time to think about it, maybe it might not be a bad idea to try to mention it.
Right. For me, thinking about it, it makes the most sense that you would be somebody that could be able to relay some message. And perhaps
Mhm.
you are the only one nearby that has crossed the veil that she was able to even contact.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
But I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
that's
think I think I
amazing.
might give it a try, Jeff. I'm really gonna think hard about that.
Well, she and you together, I guess, basically were out
Mhm.
of her body, looking at her body. And then is that as far as you got? You didn't kind of go to the light or
No, no, went up, saw the body on the ground, or, out in the car, but coming out into the as they're taking her out. Um, but it seemed like there was no connection anymore. The body didn't matter anymore. And then as she continued up, I woke up and I was back in my bed.
it's a great mystery.
It really is. I've really thought about this for a long time and just didn't quite understand, what the connection was between me and her. And then when I realized years later that I lived so close to her, I thought, gee, I know I lived in the same city, but I didn't know I was just a stone's throw away from her house. I
Mm-hmm.
was at 61 of my street. She was at 63 of hers. So straight through the backyard, and there was her house. Yet, I may have run into her before, just didn't know who she was.
Many near death experiencers talk about how there's no time on the other side.
Oh, no, there's no time, Jeff.
And it makes me wonder that if even you can kind of move forward and backwards in time, because perhaps maybe she moved backwards in time and connected
Mm.
you to kind of experience along with her. Again, as perhaps some kind of message to get to her family.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But having crossed to the other side several times, I can attest to the fact that there is no time. There's no timeline. This is like a man-made construct. Uh, this time, everything happens at the same time. I mean, you could be over there for ages and ages and ages, and it might only be a few minutes here. It might seem like years, and you come back and you've only been gone 5 minutes.
Since you've had experience on the other side, do you think it's possible that she could have moved backwards in time to make you experience it along with her?
Sure. just about anything is possible on the other side. You here, for example, if you were to want a mansion, you would have to think you wanted the mansion. You would have to build the mansion or hire somebody. There, you think it and it appears. You're a creator more so than you are here. We're all creators. We can do just about anything. But there, it's just so much easier. You think something into being. There's almost nothing that isn't possible on the other side. So I think it's very likely.
All right, if we move forward in time, you also had another, well, not another, but you also had a near-death like experience. Can you tell us about
Yes,
that?
sure. This was January of 2012. My son was in college. It was a junior college in the next city over, about 20 minutes from my city. And my son really prided himself. Is that the word prided? He was very proud of the fact. My son was very proud of the fact that he had had a perfect attendance record through school. And he didn't want to ruin that in college. So Christmas vacation was up and he was going back to school. But that morning we had a very, very severe ice storm. And it was really not safe to drive in. The younger kids, high school and elementary school, all the schools were closed, but they left it up to the colleges to decide whether they wanted to be open or not. Our local university, the kids live on campus mostly, so they kept that open. And this junior college did stay open for anybody who did want to attend. So he really wanted to go to school. And I tried to talk him out of it. I was very nervous about driving. I'm used to driving in bad weather, but this was pretty serious, very, very icy. And he didn't want to take no for an answer. So I gave in against my better judgment, which now, if it were today, I wouldn't do it, but I was younger then. And so I gave in and I was going to take him to school. I got my 1-year-old grandson in the car and my 6-year-old grandson in the car, which I took care of when their parents worked, and strapped them in. And we went down the street about a block from the house. There's a credit union, which I had to stop and get money for gas. I went through the drive-through of the credit union, and leaving the credit union, there's kind of a steep hill that goes from the window of the credit union down to the sidewalk and curb as you enter the main street in town. So as I was inching my way down this slope, I realized that they hadn't put any rock salt or anything to de-ice it. It was very slippery. I was going as slow as I could, but I started to slide, and I knew I was going to end up in the middle of the street. There was just no stopping the vehicle. It was a heavy van, and we were sliding. Now, it was the middle of winter. Everybody's windows were up. They probably had their radios on and their defrosters or heat on, and there was nobody that could hear my horn. I was laying on the horn. I was scared to death that something was going to happen to these kids that I was responsible for. And nobody heard me. I just kept beeping and beeping, and everybody was doing their own thing. And we started sliding into the main street. There was a dump truck. Now, the cars were heading east and west in front of me, and I'm heading north out of the driveway. The vehicles heading east were a dump truck and a tractor trailer. And heading west were 2 vehicles, large vehicles. I don't remember exactly what they were. I was more concerned about the ones I was heading toward. My son was white. He was scared to death. He knew. He was 18. He knew, we were really going to be hurt. As we slid into the street, the dump truck and tractor trailer were just ready to hit us, inches from us. And my 1-year-old grandson was right at that door where they would have hit. We just held on, knowing there was no chance we were going to survive this. And all of a sudden, Jeff, the vehicles vanished and appeared on the other side of our van and continued down the street. As this happened, we slid into the next lanes, and another vehicle did the same. Now, we didn't end up in the 4th lane, just 3 of those lanes, but at the same way the 2 large vehicles went through us, the other vehicle heading west did the exact same thing. My son and I just looked at each other in disbelief, and we both said at the same time, "What just happened?" We were shaking. Now, the kids in the back were far too young to even realize we were in danger. My 6-year-old grandson was playing with something, and the 1-year-old was just a baby. He didn't realize. So they didn't have any fear of it. But my son and I mean, we knew we were going to be seriously hurt or dead. It was a tractor trailer and a dump truck. And within an inch or 2 of us, they just vanished and appeared on the opposite side of our van and continued down the street. We couldn't understand that. We couldn't explain it. And to this day, he won't even talk about it. It shakes him up so badly.
Well, how do you make sense of it?
The only thing I can think of is I hear so many people say that we're living in a matrix. I don't know how true that is. I suppose it's very possible, but there was someone, something in control that there was a reason we were not supposed to die in that accident or be hurt. I don't know who or what was responsible for it, but I'm just thankful that we survived it without a scratch. I don't understand it. I mean, we both saw it. It wasn't just me, and somebody could say, well, geez, you're crazy. You didn't really see that. You were imagining it. My son and I both witnessed it together, and neither one of us can make any sense of it. We were very blessed.
At first, I kind of was thinking it was either something like the Matrix or a glitch in the Matrix, or possibly, maybe it was that man that visited you as a child that helped you out, or an ET that.
Yeah, I suppose it's possible.
Sometimes I think, anyways, ETs are the synonymous with light beings and angels. So
yes, I
who
do
knows
too.
what happened? Have you had any ET contact?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Was this
back?
Was this before or after?
This was before, Jeff. I'm sorry, I kind of got out of order here, but the experience with the extraterrestrials, or these beings that I met, was back in 1987. So I'm sorry, that was before this this experience in the vehicle. Now I was pretty young. I was only 24. I would be 25 that month. And at the time it happened, I was terrified. I don't think I've been through some pretty crazy stuff in my life, Jeff, but I don't think anything can compare to the fear that I felt when these beings came into my bedroom that night. Now, if it had happened now, at my age now, 61, and I've learned a lot more, I think I would be more curious than scared. But I was terrified out of my mind when this happened. This was April of 1987. My husband and I were asleep, and I remember being woken up. I had a 1-year-old, almost 1-year-old baby. Yeah, she turned 1 in March, so she was 13 months at the time. She was asleep in her room, but I woke up to light, kind of blinding light, but not the same type of light that I was bathed in when I crossed over. That was more of a yellow, warm light. This was just a bright white light, and it lit up the bedroom. Now, when a car comes down the street at night, it will shine light into that window, where we were sleeping. And, so you do see light from time to time, but nothing like this. It was a very bright white light. I looked, because it was so bright, I woke up and looked toward the window, and these 3 beings just floated through the closed window and then stopped at the end of my bed. I have never been so scared in my life. I was trying to scream. I'm not a screamer. I'm not the type that gets all hysterical about anything, really. I'm even, if something bad happens, I kind of quiet. I have my senses about me. But I was trying to scream because I was so terrified. They told me that I could not scream, that they had silenced my voice. They tried to explain to me that they were not here to hurt me. They were only here to help me. I didn't believe them. I was just scared to death. These were 3 beings. Now, I had only heard about these small grays with the great big eyes back then. Back when Whitley Strieber was talking about, he wrote the book Communion, and there were all these little grays. Those are the only ETs I had ever heard of up until this point.
Wasn't his contact up there in New York as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, just above me, a little north of me.
And I think also
this area is a very hot spot.
I think also Betty and Barney Hill were somewhere near you as well.
I think so. I don't remember exactly where they were, but it's a big hot spot for activity from here right up to the Adirondack Mountains. My mother even had an experience there that she told me about. So Anyway, these the beings came in. They silenced me. I was still trying to scream. I wasn't going to stop. I was screaming and screaming, but not a sound came out. They were trying to calm me down, but I wasn't going to hear. I wasn't going to hear any of it. I was still trying to scream. So somehow they were able to calm me right down. And I had only heard about these grays, small grays with the big eyes. These were nothing like that, Jeff. These were very, very tall beings, and they looked exactly like praying mantises. Now, I had never heard of a mantis being or a mantid being until 30 years later, when a friend of mine said there was a praying mantis in her yard and it was tan, but she thought they were only green. I looked up the information. She said, geez, maybe it's a stick bug instead. I said, well, let me look it up. I looked it up, and there in front of me were these mantid or mantis beings that were aliens. I was shocked. That's exactly what I saw. Every detail of the pictures, the drawings were exact. They even apologized for looking scary to me. They were very, very kind, especially the one that was female in the middle. I don't know if the other two were female, male, or neither. They didn't come across as being any, particular gender, but she was definitely female, and she had a lab coat on. When I did see out that information 30 years later, it said that these mantis beings tend to be healers and sometimes come as doctors. So that was right on the money. She told me she was there to help. They were there to help me. And she told me that they needed to help my baby. Now, I was due to have a baby, my second daughter, the end of that month. And this was just a few weeks from time to deliver her. They had to help the baby. They explained to me that her cord was wrapped around her neck 3 times. And if they didn't unwrap that cord, she would die when she was born. She'd be strangled. I was scared to death, but I couldn't move. They had me basically paralyzed. And Jeff, they would move their hands, these long insect-like claws. They would move them and they would click as they moved their fingers. They made clicking noises. And it scared the daylights out of me. The sound, if I ever hear that sound again, it's very similar clicking, still, it brings me right back. Her fingers were clicking, and she just reached into me. I mean, she made no incision. She had no tools, reached into me, and her fingers were moving, and she pulled her hands out, and she said, everything was fixed. The thing that kind of confuses me is that they had these thread-like, almost like fishing line, okay, that came from somewhere on or near them. And I had sorry about that noise. It must be the baby. I'm sorry. I had a light above my bed, and the light bulb was out because it had blown out and it wasn't replaced yet. So there was an empty hole where the light bulb would be. These things that were like fishing line, they each had one, all 3 of them. They somehow put them up into that electrical socket, and they were using the power for some reason. I don't understand if it was for themselves or it was maybe for some tool they were using, but I never saw any type of tool. But somehow they were drawing energy from where that light bulb should have been. And Jeff, I know it sounds crazy. I'm 61 years old, but to this day, I cannot sleep in a bed with a light bulb above the bed if it's missing. If there's a light bulb in there, I'm okay to sleep there. If the light bulb has been taken out, scares the heck out of me. And I don't scare easily, but I still get that same feeling like I'm way back, when that happened, and I'm too nervous to sleep at night. But it was that scary. But they kept telling me, we're not going to hurt you. We are here to help you. So they did what they had to do and pulled their little cords down out of the light socket, floated up out the window, and gone. Before they left, they did say, I forgot one thing. They did say, he will be asleep. They pointed to my husband, and she said, he will be asleep all night. You won't be able to wake him up. As I was positive they were gone, I dove on his back. I was shaking him. I was doing anything to wake him up. He slept till morning. By morning, I was calmer, and I thought, you know what? He's going to think I am insane. Everybody says when you're pregnant, you have realistic dreams, you have scary dreams. And I think that's probably what he would have thought. And I just chose not to say anything. I never told a single person until this day. And here it was, 1987. And here we are in 2023. If I were making it up or wanting to get attention from it, I think I would have done it way back then when I was 24 years old, rather than mentioning it now, all these years later in my 60s,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, anything that I was trying to make up crazy stories or anything like that. Uh, I was terrified.
Did you have any markings on your body?
Not a single mark, Jeff. And the funny thing was, I had an appointment a week previous to that for a sonogram. Later in the pregnancy, you tend to have, sonograms for different things. And I had one a week before. And he told me he wanted me to come back the following week for another one. And I didn't really think, well, geez, that's, just a week apart. Why does he need a second one? And I thought, well, maybe that's just routine. Never thought about it. So I went back for the second sonogram. And the doctor said to me, he said, I don't like to alarm anybody, so I don't say too much unless I have to. He said, but when I saw the last sonogram, he said, the baby had a cord around her neck a couple times. He said, and I wanted to do another sonogram as it got closer to see if maybe she had gotten that off by herself. Otherwise, we may have had to do a C-section. He said, and I didn't want to alarm you because many times they do untangle. But it just brought it back like, well, wait a minute. A week before, he confirmed that her cord was around her neck, yet he never said a word to me until after the fact. And when he said that, I just thought, oh my gosh, this was real. It just totally blew my mind.
That's amazing. I don't think I'm the only person, but it's interesting to think about that a mantis being would be far superior to us, because we see
I
them
believe
as
they are.
because we see them as bugs on our planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, imagine if we are bugs on their planet.
Maybe we are. And Jeff, if the bees ceased to exist, we wouldn't exist, right? If the bees were completely, wiped out, we
Right.
would not be able to exist. Maybe these insects that we so easily, not myself, but I mean, many people will so easily kill rather than just let back outside or, ignore. Maybe they are far superior to us. Look at the way ants work together and different insects work together to achieve everything for the colony or, for the queen, whatever. But I think we're the only race that really kills itself so much as we do. I really believe that these mantis beings or insects, whatever, I think they really are far superior. They didn't need any type of tool to do surgery. They didn't make any marks on me. They just reached in, moved her fingers around, untangled, and out. There was not a mark on my body. So I really do believe that they are superior to us. They just look different from us.
Do you think it's possible you've had a lifetime of ET contact?
Well, I think it's very likely, Jeff, because I have heard from reliable sources that ETs have contracts with certain families. Now, I don't know it to be true, but it makes a lot of sense to me. They say that if you excuse me, please, if you've had contact with an ET, chances are your parents or grandparents may have also. It tends to be a family type thing. My mother told me a story about being in the Adirondacks with her boyfriend years and years ago. He wanted to climb way up on a tower to look over the mountains, and she was afraid of heights. So she didn't want to do it. She said she'd stay down below. And he said, okay. He said, I'll only be gone, 10 minutes, 15 tops. Just hang on and I'll be right back. So she stayed at the bottom and she waited for him, and she waited and waited and waited, and he wasn't coming down. It was high enough where he was in a tower where she couldn't quite see him, but he did climb up and he didn't climb back down. She waited for 2.5 hours and he finally came back down. And she said to him, what took you so long up there? I was starting to think something was wrong, and I was too afraid to climb up there to see if you were okay. He said, what do you mean? I was up there 5 minutes and I hurried right back. He had no idea he was gone 2.5 hours. Yet she checked her watch and he was up there 2.5 hours. Yet the Adirondacks is one of the biggest hotspots for ET activity.
If we get back to the Matrix for a second, another possible cause of your shared death experience with this woman is just a glitch in the Matrix, and somehow your consciousness got mixed up with hers.
Yeah, that's very likely. Very likely. You hear so much about that, somebody driving down a street and they have a store there that they've never seen before. It looks like it's from the olden days, or, they go in and then they go back outside and all of a sudden it's a different store, or they drive down a street they've always driven down and it looks completely different, from like 100, 200 years ago. Uh, the next day they drive down the same street and it's back to normal. So I guess it's very likely. It's interesting,
Yes, it is. And you would be the perfect person to be on one of those TV shows with people who have amazing mysteries that happen to them. Because you've not only
That'd be
had
fun.
one, but you've had like two or three.
Yeah. I've had a lifetime of this type thing, Jeff. Really, just seems like on and off through my life, all these, strange experiences.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you up for it, Ann?
Sure. The only social media I really have is Facebook, and it's under Ann Tunaley, Tunaley, and it's Ann without an E, Ann. I'd be glad to talk to anybody.
Right. That's great.
They can PM me, or they can just, I guess that's probably the only thing is go onto Facebook Messenger and PM me. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
And has any mysterious things happened to any other family members?
I had my youngest son was born with Kaler cardiofacial syndrome, which is definitely a fatal condition, and they gave him 12 hours or less to live. That's my 28-year-old now, who was 18 at the time that I woke up. And uh, it was very, very hard to keep him alive for the year and a half that I did. And when he was ready to go in for his open heart surgery, the doctor just fell to his knees, literally, and said, "This is a miracle. In my entire career as a pediatric cardiologist, I've never seen this." I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "Your son has an aneurysm on his heart." That scared me. I thought that was bad because my grandmother died from an aneurysm in her brain. He said, "No, you don't understand. This is good. This has sealed off the huge hole that was in his heart." He couldn't understand it. He said, "There's no medical explanation for this." Um, he said, "It may only hold a short while, but it'll buy us time until he gets stronger for surgery." To this day, he has never needed open heart surgery. And he's probably the only person that has lived with Kaler cardiofacial syndrome and is okay now, that didn't die from it. Now, there's Kaler syndrome, which you can survive, but Kaler cardiofacial syndrome, you don't normally survive. You're usually born with a hydrocephalus, severe retardation, all kinds of things. But I mean, he did need a lot of speech, occupational, and physical therapy through his life, but he got the all clear at age 14 that his heart was perfect and had been the whole time since that happened.
That's
So I
great.
kind of think maybe she helped him out there.
That's great.
And my other son, Noah, had a serious accident. He was drinking his baby bottle and fell. We were outside. I had him strapped in the stroller. I didn't have a plastic bottle because they were getting dirty and I couldn't get the, smell out of them and stuff. So I gave him a glass bottle, but I strapped him in the stroller and I thought, well, the worst that can happen is he can throw it on the ground and break it, but I'll bring all kinds of stuff to clean up the mess so nobody gets hurt. So I was convinced he was safe. My daughter wanted to push the stroller and she was very careful, but we weren't using our big expensive stroller from Italy, the triple stroller that we normally did. We got one of those cheap little umbrollas, and the wheels turned. The front wheels turned. She lost her balance. He fell forward onto the sidewalk and she fell on top of him. The glass bottle smashed in his face. I mean, he didn't even look human at that point, Jeff. His lip was gone. His nose was gone. We found his lip way up in his throat, in the roof of his mouth. He had a lot of plastic surgery. But what happened was, at the scene of the accident, a woman went, she had white jeans, white pants, a white sweater, and a little cross necklace. She had blonde hair. There was a huge crowd because school was just letting out, and that's where we worked to get my daughters out of school. A huge crowd around us. The crowd parted, and this woman came up to me, and she said, "Can I please pray for your son?" And I said, "Yes, of course." She put one hand on my forehead, but over my eyes at the same time, and she put one hand on his eyes, and she prayed, and she said, "There will be no glass in his eyes." That was my biggest fear, was that he was going to be blind. There was so much glass, Jeff. It was unbelievable. His face was just torn up. He got 197 stitches in his face and head from that bottle. I felt so guilty for letting him even have it. but I thought he was safe in the stroller. With all those stitches, and he had little pieces of glass coming out of his face and head until he was 9 years old, just surfacing and having to pull it out. But they checked him in the hospital and they said they couldn't understand it because as much as his face and head were cut up, there wasn't a single piece of glass in his eyes, and his sight was spared. And when I asked people if they knew who the woman was, they said, "What woman? There was no woman there with you." I mean, there was a crowd, but there was no woman in white that was, kneeling down and talking to you. So it was pretty remarkable. I mean, it was just, nobody else saw her, yet I could reach out and touch her. She touched me. I felt her hand over my eyes and forehead. She physically touched me and she touched him, yet nobody else saw her. And he never had a piece of glass in his eyes, not one speck of glass, and all those stitches in his face and head. So I've had some pretty remarkable things happen through my life.
And before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Sure. I think it's very important to keep an open mind, Jeff. There are a lot of things that we either don't understand or are just very unaware of, that happen in this world and around us. And if we have an open mind, maybe we won't think that people are so crazy when they say that they've had these experiences, and we don't think, oh geez, they're just trying to get attention or making up stories. Keep an open mind, because I think the more open your mind is, the more you'll learn, and you may just have experiences of your own someday.
And thank you for that message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff. It was great talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.